So occasion, I mentioned occasion a little bit a while ago. So occasion is the reason why, sometimes I call it context. That's my word, but they call it occasion. So occasion can be, or context can be the assignment. What is the assignment asking you to do? It also includes the specific audience. So sometimes you might be asked to write to a specific audience. You might be given a specific purpose. You might be given a specific type of essay format, right? So like our first essay may be a narrative, right? So I mentioned earlier, right? If you turn in a haiku when I've asked you for a sonnet, well, okay, it might be a darn good haiku, but it's not a sonnet. So you haven't met the occasion of the assignment. So that's not good, right? So all of these things are important context to understand that you have to meet when you're understanding what to do in the essay, right? And again, these are all going on, right? Now sometimes you may get to choose these, right? You may just be given a very generic. So you're going to write a research paper that has to have 5 outside sources and must be persuasive and must deal with a current event. And has to be 5 pages long. That might be all you're given, right? Persuasive, research paper, 5 sources, 5 pages long. And then you get to do everything else. So you get to choose the audience, you get to choose the topic, right? So sometimes you are given a lot of choices, but you have to make those choices. You have to figure out an audience, you have to figure out your purpose, right? But you're allowed to make those choices, and sometimes the teacher will make those choices for you. I want you to write to this. I want you to write to your peers. It must be a cause and effect essay. It must be persuasive. It must be about a current event facing Oklahoma teens, right? So sometimes you are given a lot of those occasions, and you just have to figure out a topic within all of those, right? So again, occasion is another important part of understanding the limits of an assignment. And then knowledge, right? What do you know or don't know about a subject, right? So again, before you start writing about something, you need to basically do a knowledge inventory, right? And it says here, different writing situations require different kinds of knowledge. You may have a personal essay where all you need to know is about yourself. But even that can be tricky. You want to choose a topic that's going to be really suitable. I mean, we have all sorts of things, stories that we could tell about ourselves, but not all of them are going to work well for a written form, first of all, right? Some things do much better if we can verbally tell them, right? Some things just are really still messy and we haven't really dealt with them very well. And so maybe we shouldn't write about them yet because we don't have a real firm understanding of what they all mean, right? So maybe we want to talk about something that, we really can talk about well, right? We have a real clear kind of understanding of what was the whole point of all of that, right? Sometimes, we have an experience that sure we could write about, but it was kind of cliched and there's like no surprises, right? We're writing about a personal narrative. We want to write something that's going to be meaty and juicy, and maybe we can give some surprises to our readers, right? So again, we want to pick the best, kind of personal experience, right? So even though it's personal and we're all drawing from our own experience, we don't have any other knowledge. That still doesn't mean that we can just choose anything, right? So again, writing an argumentative essay, though, we're going to have to go beyond our own knowledge and do research, right? But we can still choose a topic that we might have some knowledge about. But generally speaking, in academic essay, we're not allowed to use our own personal knowledge, right? Now, that isn't a given, right? Sometimes we're allowed to include personal knowledge, or sometimes we're required to choose something that we have some kind of personal connection to. But again, we have to expand that, right? So here is this really great checklist that has all of these different setting these limits that you can use, right? That reminds you how to, use these checklists. You can create your own as well. Uh, you know, do what works for you. So once we kind of get that, then we go from subject to topic. right? So this is basically where a subject is a broad idea. It's general. Now we have to narrow that down to a topic. So sometimes we might be given a subject to write about, and then we have to do some of these invention strategies to get us to the point of a topic that we can write about, right? That we can really refine, right? And again, it needs to be something that we can cover within the time and space available. So a 2-page essay versus a 10-page essay, right? So we can have, there are two strategies that can help us: questions for probing and free writing. So these are questions that are, sometimes they're called the journalism questions, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. They are specifically, this is, about helping us delve into the way our mind works so that they really elicit information in a really great way. One question can elicit more than one answer, right? And then not every question is going to work for every topic, but we should still try to happen. So here's, right, there's just this checklist of, right, how did it happen? When did it happen? Where did it happen? Who did it? What does it look like, right? So again, if you think of these journalism questions are meant to elicit as much information as possible. And that's, again, what you're doing here, right? And it says some of these questions can yield many workable topics. So here is an example of how you might use these questions to help refine something about the Brooklyn Bridge, right? And so here's the point. The more ideas you have, the wider your choice, right? And that's the purpose here. Getting these, remember, your ideas, we're in the invention stage. We want to get as many ideas down on paper so that we have choices. And then sometimes we'll pick something and we'll start writing about it, and then we hit a wall. We can go back to what we did, in this invention, and we might find more ideas that we can add. Or we might say, gosh, this is not going, I need a whole different layout. And then I can go back and look and say, oh, I'll try this one instead, right? So we don't have to go back and redo everything. Maybe I can go back and find another idea, right? And again, I can repeat the process as many times as I need. I can eliminate ideas that don't interest me, that are too complex, or don't fit my assignment, right? And then I can select the topic that fits the best when I do all of these questions. The other one that can help me is called free writing. And free writing is hard because it is this fixed writing period, 5 to 10 minutes where I don't stop writing, and I don't pay attention to anything like grammar. I just, one person, I think it was Donald Murray, he's a very famous writer, in the composition world, he called it throwing up on the page, right? I just write down as fast as I can for 5 to 10 minutes without stopping, and I don't care if the ideas go off topic. The idea is just to, here's the secret, is to keep writing, right? I just want the ideas to flow, and it is hard to write constantly. You will be shocked at how often you'll pause, right? And you're not supposed to pause. If you do pause, you got to keep writing. Even if you write just like blah, 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 I mean, literally write the word blah, or something like, I can't think of anything right now. My brain has gone dumb. I hate this. 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 The idea is by constantly writing, you will come out, right? Even if it's something like, oh, a squirrel just walked across the pond in front of me, right? I mean, just whatever comes into your head comes down on the page, right? And then by the end of that, you go and you start looking for things, right? You scratch out the stuff that's not relevant. You circle the ideas and loop them or highlight them or whatever, and pull out what's good. Now here you talk about, they call focused free writing or looping, where then you pull out the ideas that seem to be prominent and then you free write again, and you keep free writing and re-free writing until you really get into some good stuff, right? I like doing free writing where I'm just diving in and I'm just starting to write these long, because I like it, because look, you can see here, it's like writing in long paragraphs, and I just like that, as opposed to real jotting down stuff in small lists, right? That's just works for me. Again, you do something that works for you, right? So trying to find something to say. So I will say this, if you haven't noticed this, they're organizing these invention strategies in the order that they really work when you're trying to find an idea. So they start off with the more longer kind of things where you're just trying to get large ideas on the paper. So now that you've got a bunch of ideas, now how do you start focusing and really sussing out things? So right now that you've got topics, now we're going to find Now that you've narrowed it down, what can we say about this topic, right? So I will say though that brainstorming is something that you can use if you're just trying to find real quick ideas at any time. Brainstorming is good. But here, now that you've got an idea, right? Okay, what can you say about it, right? Now here they talk about you can do it in a group or on your own. It can be a list or random notes. It can be phrases, statements, words, questions, drawings, or diagrams. It is not big old paragraphs. It is just, sometimes brainstorming is called listing, right? And so here's what this looked like, right? I like to think of it as like a grocery list where you're just jotting down ideas really quickly, but you're not writing sentences, right? You are just doing this as quickly as possible. So the idea is just, again, as many ideas as you can on the list. Journal writing is something that is an ongoing process that's usually not tied necessarily to anything. Though if you're doing a long-term project, keeping a journal along the way as you write is oftentimes something that you can do. But this is the way a lot of successful writers do. They just journal all the time. They're always, I mean, I carry a journal with me all the time anyway, but they're always just jotting things down. So again, this is where you're just recording your thoughts, recording your impressions, recording your feelings in a consistent day. And then when you need something to write about, you go back to your journal and you just start flipping through and say, was there anything that inspired me? Anything that caught my eye? Any idea, right? That's what the journal is for. So here you can see this journal entry, right? And so when you get all of this done, right, then how do you know what to do? So this is where we start grouping ideas to find out, do we have enough material to actually produce an essay, right? So clustering is a kind of a visual spatial kind of technique that helps us see the relationship of ideas to each other, right? It helps us see where things belong and do we need more information, right? Now it says you can use this as an earlier stage. Some people really like this, especially if you're really a visual, spatial kind of person. But again, it's really useful at this point to again see how all of these ideas work together. So this is what you do. You start with your main idea in the center and you put a circle around it. Some people like to double bubble it or maybe put a square around it to make sure that they see that it is the main idea. And then you put your next rim of ideas around it and you connect it with a line. And then around each of these ideas, you put the ideas that are related to this around this. So that you keep going out and out and out, right? So cheating incident. So it was in college, during a test, and after the test. And then in college, implications of goal of education. Those were the ideas related to that. During the test, okay, it was an AP chemistry, studied a lot, and Jeff. Those are the ideas related to during the test. And then after the test, anger, frustration, dismissed idea. And then frustration related to that was wanted to tell, right? And so again, you see, after circling the topic, surround it with the words and phrases that identify the major points you need to discuss with that topic. And then with those levels, then circle these words and phrases and connect them to the topic in the center, and then construct around those ideas the points related to them, right? So you can kind of see that if this were an essay, your thesis would be, and we'll talk about that, but if you know what that is, the main point of your essay would be about cheating. And then the supporting points that you're going to talk about would be these points. And then to talk about this would be what these points would be about, right? Another way to do this, and this is what I prefer, is doing the informal outline. Now, I have you guys do an informal outline, but actually I have a format that I want you to use. This is different because this is like, these aren't complete sentences. So realize that when I say informal outline for your essays, your essay outlines, this is very different than what we're talking about here, right? But again, the idea in Invention is to just kind of see how all of your ideas are working together. You're organizing your information, right? So this just gives you an overview, allows you to focus your thoughts and see where you need more information. Is there any gap? Because what happens is, you might have a good idea, but maybe there's just not enough info there for you to write an essay about. If you've got a personal essay, if you're not allowed to do any kind of outside research, you might have a good idea, but you just might not know enough about that topic to write the essay about. And that's what you can find out here by doing this strategy, right? So informal outlines, we're not doing like a Roman letter 1, Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, and all that, right? This is just, again, putting it in some kind of organization, right? So you can see here how she does that, right? So developing a thesis is then what we go to after we get all of those ideas, right? So develop the thesis in red is the main point of your essay, right? It is a single sentence at the end of your first paragraph, which is your introduction, right? And again, without your thesis, your essay would just be a collection of ideas with no focus or direction. So this is the brain of your essay. This tells you, your reader, what exactly you're going to say about your topic, right? So it's not a title, it's not an announcement of intent, it's not a statement of fact. So here is what it means by an announcement of intent. I will examine the pros and cons of self-driving cars. You will never, ever say in an essay in this class, the purpose of this paper, or I will say in this class, or this essay will. Never, ever, never announce, never draw attention to your essay as an essay or yourself as the writer. In this paper, I will say. No, never, never do that. Okay? First of all, if you do it, and I've told you not to do that, then I will be wondering why you did it, because that is actually an indication that maybe you had ChatGPT write your paper, or you got it from another class where some people teach that that's okay to do it. I know some teachers in high school or middle school tell you to do that. So no, do not do that, right? You also are not just doing a statement of fact. A statement of fact is a statement of fact. There's nothing you can do with it. An essay is about something you are trying to improve or you're trying to expand on. Fact is fact, right? So self-driving cars have features that allow them to accelerate, brake, park, and steer with no driver interaction. Now, we definitely use facts in essays to back up points that we're making, but a thesis statement should be something that we have to prove in some way, right? So here is the thesis statement. Self-driving cars are safer than standard models because they operate more efficiently and eliminate accidents caused by human error. So think about that. Self-driving cars are safer. People would not agree with that, right? Or they would not understand that you need information to prove that. So that's why that is a thesis. It demands more information, right? And here's a thesis or title. That's not a thesis, right? So you can just see, again, look at this. You can see the differences in all these things to show why one is a thesis and one isn't, right? So here, this essay will discuss, never say that, right? In his essay, George Orwell describes a hanging that he witnessed in Burma. Well, that's just a summary of what's going on in that thesis or that story, right? That's not a thesis of what you will be talking about. Here, in a hanging, George Orwell shows that capital punishment is not only brutal, but also immoral, right? Well, that is an interpretation, someone's interpretation of what they think is going on in the story, right? They're interpreting what Orwell is trying to do in the story. They're not summarizing what happens, right? Okay, so what a good thesis does for the writer, it plans, organizes, and unifies. For the reader, it identifies, it guides, and it clarifies, right? So when you're deciding on a thesis, right, no rule determines when you draft your thesis, right? The only thing is, notice in red, you have to have a thesis statement before you begin to draft your first draft. If you do not have a thesis, you are not drafting an essay, you are just free writing, right? So you have to have a thesis of some kind before you start writing your essay, but it can come at any part of that invention cycle, right? Now, here is the caveat. We call it a working or tentative thesis because as you're writing your paper, you may be inspired. Your ideas may shift, and so you may have to go back and revise your thesis. That's totally fine. Writing is messy, right? But you have to have at least a working thesis in mind to guide your writing process, right? So again, when you're stating your thesis, it's one sentence. So it clearly expresses the essay's main idea, right? It communicates your essay's purpose, right? Are you going to be informing, persuading, or just expressing? It is clearly worded. We are not saying my thesis is, or the thesis of this essay, or in my essay I will say, right? So here we have this nice little chart that talks about what is an effective thesis. So over here are bad, bad, bad on the right. Good, good, good. Yes, we want these right here, right? It should not include every point you will discuss in your essay, but it needs to give a specific direction so we kind of see the overview, right? And once we get into writing, we'll see, I'll give you some more examples. And then we have this students developing an essay. You can kind of the thesis. So you should so there's something called an implied thesis, but notice in red, in most college writing, you should state your thesis to avoid any risk of being misunderstood or of wandering away from your topic. So yes, you must state your thesis in your essays in this class. And so here's a nice little checklist for your thesis. Okay. So I hope that helps you understand some of the basics of getting started. We will talk about introductions and body paragraphs and all that in a future video. So I will see you at that one. Our next video will be about writing the narrative, and we will talk about paragraphing and things like that then. Bye-bye.